You know, it's a great pleasure to have J.D. Vance, who is sharp as hell. You see him on the campaign trail. He'll stand up to anybody. He really eviscerates them with logic and common sense. J.D. Vance, I watched this speech that Kamala Harris gave. She talks about Trump has an enemies list. He's going to use the military against the people. Tax cuts for billionaires and corporations, a 20% national sales tax. He's going to cut Medicare and Social Security. She's a pathological liar. Does she think this is going to work?
I don't know, Mark, but you're right. She's a pathological liar. I mean, everything that you just said from that she has argued is a lie. And, she's just plainly unable to run on her own record. She doesn't have the ability to say, well, my policies lower the price of groceries, or my policies lower the price of housing, or my policies secure the southern border, because her policies had the exact opposite effect. And so she's trying to run on this caricature of Donald Trump and Republicans. But I think the American people are smart enough to reject it and recognize that when you have the sitting vice president who has no record and no accomplishments to speak of, that's a reflection on her. And we're going to find out, of course, in the next 5 days. But I'd encourage everybody who wants to reject this kind of politics to get out there and vote for Donald Trump for president.
You know, J.D. Vance, she keeps saying she comes from a middle-class family. I guess so. She had 2 PhD professor, tenure professor parents. I guess that's middle class. You really come from a dirt poor situation in Appalachia. Look what you've done business-wise. You joined the military. Look at you politically and so forth. You are the American dream, aren't you? She's trying to pretend that she has some kind of a record similar to you.
There's definitely some element of that, Mark, where she's trying to pretend that she can empathize with the story of most Americans. And of course she can't. I mean, most Americans didn't grow up in a household with a Marxist professor as a parent. But I think a lot of what people are rejecting is, people will ask her these questions, Mark, and she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. And then they'll ask her, how are you going to lower the price of groceries? And she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. And how are you going to close down the southern border? Well, I worked at McDonald's. And you realize when you listen to a person talk, she has no ideas for how she's going to govern the country. She has no plans, no policies. If you get her away from the slogans, she can't even speak in understandable English because she doesn't have any idea what she wants to do. President Trump has made this argument about Kamala, Mark, that I think is very important and very accurate, which is that she's not really running for president of the United States. She's basically running to be the head of a machine, the machine that is geared towards American decline, geared towards open borders, geared towards the destruction of American founding principles. But she's basically a figurehead. And when you listen to her talk, you realize that what is most worrisome, it's not just Kamala Harris, it's the 100 bureaucrats that are going to be standing behind her actually implementing the policies of the government, because she doesn't have any idea what she wants to do.
The other thing is this. I've never heard of a candidate who runs for office where she or her campaign or surrogates are calling tens of millions of Americans neo-Nazis or fascists, with her boss calling them garbage. I mean, this really is a race of the ruling class in Washington, D.C. versus the people, isn't it?
That's exactly right, Mark. And you're right. I don't know that I've ever seen. Of course, Hillary Clinton with the basket of deplorables comment came pretty close in 2016. Besides that, I've never seen a candidate for president attack a large segment of the American population. Donald J. Trump and I asked for this. Criticize us all you want to. Kamala Harris asked for this, and we certainly do criticize her a lot. But the American people, you have to try to persuade them and not attack them. And if you look at her campaign messaging, there's this element where she's judging the American people, attacking the American people, looking down on them for daring to recognize that Kamala Harris has done a bad job. The border is wide open, and Kamala Harris will say, well, if you notice that, you're a racist. And, of course, people can't afford groceries. And if people criticize her, they'll say, well, you're a dummy. You don't know how the economy works. Or if you gather in celebration of American ideals and American freedom, Tim Walz will call you a fascist, or Joe Biden will call you garbage. And Kamala Harris, she is sitting at the top of this machine. They hate the American people. The Democratic leadership cannot stand that the American people are smart enough to recognize that their policies have been a failure. And so, again, instead of saying, this is how we're going to make your life better, they're deciding to attack their fellow Americans I've never seen it happen in a major party presidential candidate where the message isn't, here's how I'm going to make your life better. The message is, if you dare notice that Kamala Harris is a failure, you're a bad person. I don't know who that's supposed to persuade.
Kamala Harris, I don't care if you call her borders are, she's certainly the vice president. She can speak out, the number 2 in the executive branch. We have massive sex slavery going on the southern border, mostly people of color, by the way. They've lost track of 325,000 unaccompanied minors. She never has talked about it. She's never talked about the worst slavery situation since the Civil War under her watch, or the whereabouts of hundreds of thousands of children. Isn't that kind of cold-blooded?
It's very cold-blooded, Mark, and in some ways it's even worse than that, because what they'll do is they'll accuse Donald Trump of wanting to engage in child separation. And what they mean by that, of course, is simply that if you're a criminal or you're a violent illegal immigrant and Donald Trump arrests you, like obviously that person who's arrested is going to be separated from their family members. They ignore the fact that there are 325,000 missing children. The real family separation policy is Kamala Harris's open border. And you're exactly right. I mean, this is medieval levels of evil stuff happening in our country. It doesn't belong anywhere near a civilized society. But the Mexican drug cartels, from sex slavery to mass drug trafficking to human trafficking to physical slavery, these guys have reintroduced some of the most barbaric practices in human history into our country. It's happening right underneath our noses, sometimes in plain sight of our fellow Americans, and Kamala Harris seems not to care about it. And, Mark, I would respect her, actually, if she just said, you know what, we tried the open border stuff. It was crazy. I made a mistake. Let's go back to rationality. I would actually respect that. She can't do that. So instead, again, of admitting her own failures or trying to advance an alternative policy, she just attacks Trump. But most importantly, she attracts Trump's voters, which I think is really disgraceful.
You know, J.D. Vance, I don't understand why Americans are supposed to rely now on Kamala Harris to fix what they've done. It's the most bizarre argument. She's not going to reverse course. She was the most radical senator in the United States. She cast about 33 times to change these tie votes in the Senate, including this outrageous massive inflation bill. And it goes on and on and on. She was not a bipartisan senator. She did not work with the Republicans. She was an extremist. She attacked the ICE, called them Klansmen. She's attacked and supported defunding the cops. She hasn't voted for a single pay increase for a single military service person. She is all these radical things. Isn't that kind of why she talks these word salads in part? Not because she's only not that bright, which I would say she's not, but because what the hell is she going to say?
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. I think she does hide what she actually believes, and that's one of the reasons why she uses these word salads. You're exactly right. She doesn't have a bipartisan record of accomplishment to speak of. There's no piece of legislation with Kamala's name on it where she can say, hey, I did this thing. It was broadly popular, and it made your life better, most importantly. Again, so she's become an attack dog. I mean, think about this. She's a sitting vice president. Americans can't afford groceries. They can't afford housing. We've had fentanyl that's overwhelmed our communities, and there isn't a single thing that she can point to that she has done to solve these problems. In fact, she is the source of many of these problems. And sometimes, Mark, as you know, politics can be very complicated. Some of these issues are very complex. But the simple theory that I have of this election is Kamala Harris broke it. Donald Trump will fix it. Donald Trump is going to fix this stuff by implementing some common sense back in government. And I'd encourage, again, every American, get out there and vote. Swamp the vote. We've got to make sure that this kind of disgusting politics, where instead of running on your achievements, you run on attacking your fellow citizens. We cannot reward this, because if we do, the Democrats are going to get even worse.
I talk about the Constitution a lot on this program. They want to eliminate the Electoral College so 11 blue states will choose the president. They want to eliminate the filibuster so they can give Puerto Rico and D.C. 2 senators. That would be 4 Democrat senators. We'd never win the Senate again. They want to pack the Supreme Court, which is intentionally supposed to be independent. At the core of our Constitution, this, J.D. Vance, is separation of powers, power versus power. And she has proposal after proposal, as does her party, to destroy checks and balances, to destroy those things so they can ram through this radical agenda. And if you don't win, And if we don't take the Senate and if we don't hold the House, that's exactly what they're going to do. You know, this isn't a white paper election. This is for all the beans, isn't it?
That's exactly right, Mark. They're bragging about it. They're bragging about fundamentally changing the Constitution, using the additional senators of D.C. and Puerto Rico to pack the Supreme Court, effectively eliminating any of the checks and balances that exist in our system. And you have to ask yourself, why do they want to do it? Like, why do they want to destroy the checks and balances in our system, Mark? It's because they want to do things that they know the American people would never stand for. When we talk about funding gender transition surgeries for illegal aliens, when we talk about opening the southern border, when we talk about, tax rates where 50% or 60 cents on every dollar that you make is going to the federal government, plus whatever goes to the state and local government, this is the end of America as we know it. And she's bragging about this stuff. I've never seen this in my life, Mark, a politician bragging about wanting to increase your taxes, a politician bragging about using taxpayer money to fund sex changes for illegal aliens. She wants to do all this stuff. She's told us she wants to do all of this stuff, and she's told us she's willing to set the Constitution on fire to the extent that it serves as a check on her power. So she wants to do this stuff, and we have one opportunity, Mark, one opportunity to stop it, and that opportunity is in 5 days.
We must vote. We can't wring our hands after the fact. We got to vote big and make sure we crush them politically. We must vote, America. You know, J.D. Vance, it's really been good to get to know you a bit, to read your book, which I hadn't done. Actually, my wife was reading it to me. I said, he did what? And you're really an incredibly important partner running with Donald Trump here, and you'd be a fantastic vice president. I want my audience, if you can't vote early now, vote on Election Day, but vote for God's sakes. We wish you all the best. Stay safe.
Thank you, Mark. Take care, man.
You too. That's J.D. Vance. What a fantastic guy, really. As I've gotten to know about him more and more, you've seen him, you hear him now. What a fantastic vice presidential candidate and vice president he will make. Ladies and gentlemen, it's so crucial that you vote. Look at the quality of our candidates and look at theirs, for God's sakes. Kamala Harris? Tim Walz? Are you kidding me?